We're now live, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So, welcome everybody to the Cabinet Markets Working Group. And if we can first, typical, no sooner started. So, anyway, welcome everybody, including Councillor Thompson. And if we can just start, Sophie, with apologies and any substitutes.
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Councillors Blackburn, Robinson, Smith and M. Swift, and Councillor Atkinson is here to substitute for Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Councillor Atkinson. And then just moving on to members' interest, to remind members of the need to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or any other interest they might have in relation to the items included on the agenda, either now or before we start discussing the item if you forget at this point. Any interests that anybody wants to raise at the moment? No. Okay, thank you. Right, so, and it's not recommended that the public be excluded from any of the items on this agenda. And just to let everybody know, after we've dealt with the minutes, I'm going to move straight to item 7, as Natasha has another commitment. So I've agreed to take that item early. So in relation to the minutes, does anybody have any matters arising from those or any corrections, or can we agree them as a true record and I can sign them? Everybody happy with that? Okay, yeah, I'll take that as they're agreed. Thank you. Right, so in that case, Natasha and Karen Lewis, who's with you, if you can move on to the communications update. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So hello everybody, I'm Natasha White. I'm the communication manager here at Calderdale Council, and I'm with my colleague Karen Lewis, campaigns officer in the corporate communications team. So I'd like to talk through some of the highlights from Karen's report. Since our last meeting, we have a new look landing page on the council's website for the markets, which you'll find at calderdale.gov.uk/markets. It's now a lot easier to find the individual markets and market halls. We have sections on how to become a trader, specialist markets, and also charity stalls. We have a new events section, a new news section, plus our trader films. The next step with the website is to update each individual markets page now with new content and new photography. And then we can move to remove the external out-of-date Halifax Borough Markets website. The other thing I'd like to talk about is at the last meeting I mentioned that we were about to embark on our Christmas campaign. Seems a long time ago now, but we worked on that with fellow comms colleagues in the corporate team, the regeneration team, Visit Calderdale, Place Development, and the Business and Skills team. The campaign was called Christmas Under One Roof, which showcased the variety of stalls and benefits of Christmas shopping in Halifax Borough Market to help drive footfall. We produced a series of 16 films with traders, including an introduction by a sixth form student from Trinity Sixth Form, which we then promoted via social media. I'm pleased to say that over both Twitter and Facebook, we received over 47,000 impressions with over 2,700 individual engagements. The campaign was also promoted through our website, local press and radio, as well as internally. Press releases since we last met include the International Market in Halifax in October, the Christmas campaign that I've just referred to, plus the Reindeer Trail, and also an update on the Todmorden Town deal. Coming up, we're working on ideas at the moment for an Easter campaign to roll out across all of our markets. And further to Councillor Thompson's suggestion last time of involving traders more in marketing campaigns, we're looking to provide a toolkit, probably social media toolkit for traders for the Love Your Local Markets campaign in May, We're hoping to provide traders with artwork and content that they can share and add to on their channels to help promote themselves as well as our markets. And that concludes my update. Thank you, Chair. Has anybody got any questions?
Councillor Thompson, I know that your suggestion last time has just been mentioned, but do you want to say something more about the email that you sent with the list of traders and what you were hoping that comms could do with that, or what else you might want to be done with it, and whether you also want to discuss it later on when we're looking at the journey of the markets?
Yeah, can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, sorry if it's a bit loud, I'm still at work. Yeah, it was just, I was conscious that we have our own channels for pushing out things about the market. I think the market page is about 4,500 views. We've got the website, we've got all these other bits, but I was conscious that probably the biggest asset we had to get content out there cheaply was the traders themselves. So I just had a quick look on a slow evening and put a list of what I had together, which I know John said he's going to add to and other people can add to. And I'm just thinking that not necessarily for every single thing, but for things like the big campaigns we want to push, we can send everything through to them and then go, can you share it? Can you post it to your social media as well, just to get the reach bigger? Was just my thought with it, that could be something we could use going forward, because it's free. We don't need to pay for that advertising. It's free, and then it will boost how many people are seeing it. The only other thing I wanted to mention is that I thought that the under one roof slogan is really good, and that could be used for future things. So it could be Easter under one roof, shopping under one roof, food under one roof, and then you can highlight whichever specific bits you want. So if we're going to do like we had the vegetable stalls and the food thing, if we were to do that again, we could have food under one roof and then just keep it consistent. So when people hear under one roof, they think, all right, it's the borough market. But no, I really like the Christmas stuff, actually. I was very pleased with it.
Excellent. Oh, okay, so Natasha, when you say that you work with traders, is that list going to be useful to you? Does it add to the people that you have contact with? And you were copied into that email with the list? Yeah.
Yes, I was. I think John and I and Karen will probably need a conversation about just how we do it, because Karen and I look after obviously the corporate communication, Facebook and Twitter. So it might not be appropriate to share all the sort of individual trader posts, but there'll be a way of perhaps sharing the individual market Facebook and Twitter that John and the markets team look after. And I think the sort of campaigns like Love Your Local Market, where we can help to amplify the things that are going on with the individual markets and maybe some traders and pulling everything together. That's, I think, where corporate communications can come into its fore. But yeah, I think thank you, Councillor Thompson, for that list. 20,000 followers is a real boost. So yeah, we'll absolutely use that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd understood that Councillor Thompson was thinking of it the other way, that you would send them our material rather than us sharing their material. That it just gives them ready-made material and they have a ready-made audience.
Yeah, but we're thinking about doing a bit of a toolkit for the Love Your Local Market with imagery and perhaps some example content, like a ready-made toolkit that people could adapt.
And so those people on that list could be circulated with that.
Yeah.
Okay, there's just one comment I want to make in a minute, but John? John Walker, I should say.
Let me get myself to get act together first. Just following on from what Natasha was saying, the assets for Love Your Local Market campaign will not be available till probably about March, but they will provide full assets to every local authority, market service and my private operator to run the campaign. In recent months, we've been fortunate that we've got a new recruit that's quite au fait with Facebook. And we've obviously seen some impressions ramp up with the borough market, to which we now schedule at least a dozen weekly posts in conjunction with the traders. And that has seen some great successes this last month alone, because we've reached about 5,000 people just off the borough market Facebook page, with a total impressions of nearly 60k So it's working. So Councillor Thompson's probably right to raise this. It's a good mechanism of getting out there. And the recent survey that I refer to in my report shows that 99% of all market operators use Facebook as a method of promotion.
Excellent, thank you. Alan?
Thanks, Chair. Actually, just picking up on John's last comment, the list that Councillor Thompson's provided there does identify a number of traders who have Facebook pages and profiles, and you say we can look at how we can use that to extend our reach. But equally, it has quite a number of traders that we don't have the information for. Now, they either don't have that kind of social media presence, or we're just not aware of it. Either way, it just feels like there's a gap there. And I just wonder, John and or Natasha, whether there might be something that we could do. We've described the toolkit to provide the imagery, but I just wonder whether we can provide something a little bit more by way of support for some of those traders who are perhaps not quite so tech savvy, to help them to create a presence. Because of course, the greater the presence, I see the borough market and its traders and the local authority as the market authority as almost as a single entity. And I recognise there's a number of separate organisations there, but we come together as one to promote the opportunities from the market as a whole. And I just wonder whether there's an opportunity there for us to work with those traders that are perhaps, say, not quite as well advanced in the kind of their ability to promote the trades and their services as others, or even linking up the more savvy traders with the less savvy, and again, it grows the whole presence for the whole market for the benefit of all of us.
John, and then Natasha.
So yeah, Chair, there's no disputing that there is a group of unreachable people on Facebook, and that to an extent is down to, for want of a better word, digital education, really. And so we could do with really looking at how we can get to these people and educate them to use this as a tool to promote their business, really.
Okay, thanks. Natasha?
It's just occurred to me that might be an opportunity with the place development team, whether they could perhaps approach some of the gaps in the traders that haven't perhaps got a Facebook profile, and give them a hand in the business and skills team. So I can pick that up as an action and speak to my colleagues.
Okay, so just back to you, Councillor Thompson. Obviously you're there. Is that divide between the digital and the non-digital apparent, and what do you think from your experience is needed to try to get those people who aren't engaged to engage with it?
I think part of it, there's always going to be people that aren't willing to, or aren't going to engage with it because they can't. I mean, a good example was when I'm next door to, Illuminate, who've just retired, the electrical suppliers who had 3 massive stalls. And I was chatting to them a few months ago, and there's no need for them to do it. They've built their base up over years, and they're retiring. Why get involved in it? But there's always the opportunity, even if they're not going to do it themselves, set it up, is from time to time we could do a story on them ourselves. It's not linking to their Facebook, but we could talk about it, because I know when I was having a look at stuff like Grosvenors have been there since 1937, they've been there forever. There's a story there. The other thing I was going to ask about, and I'm not sure whether this is something we could do or whether it's something that we'd even want to do. I'm aware that Halifax Bid uses this town centre app, and from my impression, it's kind of not that many people are aware of it and not that many people use it, but it does actually offer discounts, and it offers, if you go to certain places and show them the app, it offers discounts and things like that. Now, I'm not sure where they are with it, if they're still promoting it, that type of thing, because I was conscious where I work, the cafe I work, we apparently had an offer on there that we must have signed up for ages ago that we weren't aware of, and no one's used it. So that could be something that we could look at, or even if it's just dropping them a message to find out where they are with it, because it could be a case that traders would be willing to get on board and say, we'll do a discount with this app in exchange for kind of some promotion, that kind of thing. I'm not sure. It's just, it's already out there, and I'm conscious with other things that are being worked on within the council. There is this Halifax Town Centre app that feels like something that's underutilised as well.
Is that something for you again, Natasha, to take away and think about how the two apps relate and overlap?
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't aware of that. So yeah, that's a really lovely suggestion. Thank you. I'll get in touch with the bid.
Okay. So what the point I was just going to make was that you have this lovely slogan of under one roof, and I went in there the other day and I went and had a cup of tea at one of the places, and after about a quarter of an hour of staring at this illegible squiggle on a board, I realised it was saying something about an offer if I went to the wine shop. And I can't remember whether you got a glass of wine or a half a bottle or something or what it was, but it was an offer, and it was a really good idea because it was connecting the market as a whole. It's encouraging people to use another stall, but it was just so small and badly written on the board that you just didn't see it. And it was little things like that it's such a shame that 9 people out of 10 won't even realise it's there. It's a bit like your app. It was just practically invisible. And again, it's about, I suppose, who has the time to go around and look at that sort of thing and say to people, well, actually, you know, this is a brilliant idea you've had, but unless you make it more obvious, it's never going to get used. And then you're going to think it's a waste of time. And it isn't a waste of time. It's just that the way you're doing it isn't helpful. And I'm not sure whose job that is really, whether it's John's staff or who. I don't know if anybody wants to come back and have any comment on that from John or Natasha as to who might deal with that kind of, not the Facebook comms, but the other kind of comms.
We've been trying to encourage traders to, I mean, for instance, when you go for your mobile phone, can you get a cup of tea while you wait for your phone repairing and things like that? So we are in discussion with some of the traders in regards to how we get them offers out to people, because it's not just all about the council, really. It is about the traders as well, also supporting us. And so, you mean, we work further on that, councillor. And also we'll populate Councillor Thompson's spreadsheet per stall, so we'll identify those gaps of those missing people as well, and we'll also add to it the Facebook pages that we've already got linked to on our own Facebook accounts.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Has anybody else got anything that they want to raise, ask, comment on? I'm not seeing anything. Okay. Thank you very much, Natasha and Karen, and thanks for the work that you've been doing. And obviously, you know, Joe, Councillor Thompson has indicated how appreciated the Christmas one has been, and I'm sure the Easter one will be as well. Okay, thank you. And obviously, you're now free to go to your other meeting. Okay, so that takes us back up the agenda to item 5, which is the revenue monitor, and that's Paul.
Thank you, Chair. The main information is in the report. I'll just make a few comments if I may. The report details the current forecast budget deficit of 143k, and the working group will note that that was the position that was reported to the working group in October and also Cabinet in November, so there's been no change since then. Just one reminder, one thing that's been said on numerous occasions, although we're forecasting a budget deficit, we do like to think about the market in actual terms. And we know in actual terms, the market is again forecast to achieve a surplus of 325k this year. So an actual surplus of 325k, but the budget deficit of 143. I think that's significant at a time, as John's alluded in the past, that all markets throughout England are facing challenges to do with the market. We've got the COVID pandemic, the impact of the COVID pandemic. We've got the current trading activity, and obviously the economic climate are all things that are hitting markets throughout the country. I think the main issue continues to be the ability of the service to generate the income. £1 million income is what the budget assumes, and a significant proportion of that is around the borough market. in simplistic budget terms, if the borough market was to achieve its full budget potential, then that would eradicate the budget deficit within the overall market service. So that just shows sort of the challenge and the challenges around, in particular, the indoor markets. We mentioned in the report about in the past about the actions in the market service review, and although with all the actions have been implemented, we do anticipate there'll be further savings generated next year. Although I think it's fair to say, Chair, that I think with the current trading activity, we don't expect the overall position to improve significantly in the future. I think there are a number of factors that can impact on the market adversely. We don't know, obviously, the continuing economic climate. John's mentioned in the past about traders that leave the market, long-standing traders that are leaving the market. And although we're quite successful with the incubator scheme, it takes us 12 months to get up to the full market rental. So that, well, obviously, when a trader leaves, we have the immediate impact of it. It takes up to 12 months to get back to the full rental that we've achieved. So there are a number of factors that can impact on the market service. And my guess is, really speaking to John and others, that the budget pressure that we've got the minute, the actions that we've implemented today has brought it down to the position we're in. I think it's going to be very difficult to take us from where we are now and improve that significantly without something significant change within the market service generally. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any comments, anybody? Questions? Councillor Thompson?
Yes, I was just wanted to kind of clarify for myself, just so I'm understanding it as well as I can. I'm just looking at 2.3. So essentially, is the biggest impact we've had, or the biggest thing that's coming out of this, is that the income is far lower than what was projected, or is significantly lower than projected, which has left us with this pressure. So I was just going to ask around occupancy. So we've got specifically around the borough market, but obviously occupancy as a whole. The occupancy of the borough market says is 75% and 7% are on incubator schemes. Do we know, once those incubator schemes have finished, do we know roughly how much of an impact that would have? Obviously, it won't be massive, but there will be some additional income coming in, or is that already in the budget?
No, sorry, I'll let John come in that in a minute, Councillor Thompson, but there will be an impact on that. Obviously, it depends on the incubation schemes and how it impacts on the individual tenants. Would you have any idea, John, on the borough market, how the incubator scheme may impact on it overall?
It won't impact on it at all, Paul, because it's already in the forecasts.
Right.
Okay.
What about the improvement, though, John, in future years? That's what we think we're talking about, really. Is
any improvement in the future years will have a significant impact on the budget, and as you've already alluded to, should the council be successful in completing full occupancy, then there will be no budget deficit. It will come in on budget. In fact, there could potentially be additional surpluses.
Okay, back to Councillor Thompson.
More of a question for John, really, on that. How, in your view, John, how feasible is full occupancy for the markets? Is 100% occupancy a realistic aim, or should we actually look at aiming for a slightly lower number and factoring that into how we budget?
Well, when you look at the content within my own report on this agenda, then you will see that obviously the national average for markets is nowhere near 100%. And so to allude ourselves to 100%, I think we would be overstretching ourselves a little bit. And particularly in a day and age where traders don't necessarily want to be tied to 6-day opening, it could be quite a task.
Okay, did you want to come back on that, Councillor Thompson?
Yes, I'm just, so in terms of the budget position, when we're looking at markets that are overspending or not generating the income that we want them to generate, is that based on them not achieving full occupancy?
It's always about bums on seats, I'm afraid.
Right.
And bums on seats that generate the income, really. So it is about recruitment, it's about change, and it's about maximising out the impending opportunities that are in front of us, really, if I'm honest.
Okay, I mean, I think we discussed this at the previous meeting, and the way in which the income targets have been set on this expectation of 100% occupancy, and whether that's realistic. And I think the feeling that we had the last time we discussed it was that whilst it's perhaps time that income target was perhaps that income target ought to be reassessed, but now is not the time, because there are so many different works going on around and in the various markets. But I do think that when all that is stopped and we get into a more stable position, then those income targets do need to be reassessed for being fit for purpose, because it does give an entirely false impression when people see that there's this deficit, but it's artificial in a sense. Yeah.
And if I can just come in on that, Chair, I think the reason that there is a budget deficit on the markets is probably going back to I think a previous budget council decision going back in the day, years ago, when they did increase the target to this level that, as you've quite rightly said, is really not sustainable in any market on an ongoing basis. So I think it's right that in the longer term, it is something that's looked at, if it is possible to do that within the overall confines of the council's budget.
And by nature, Chair, you will always, all your markets will always be subject to churn of traders.
Yeah, inevitably. And so you're never going to have that 100% all the time, are you? Whatever you do. And I think that when you say, Paul, whether that's possible within the constraints of the council, I think the council isn't ultimately assisted by having income targets which are not attainable. It's better for us all to know exactly where we are and know the true cost of things. So yeah, it's not for today and not for a little while, but it will have to be revisited.
Yeah, and just touching on the incubator scheme that I mentioned earlier, Chair, if I can, that just to remind the working group that up to the first 3 months, new tenants don't pay any rent. 3 to 6 months, it's 25%, 6 to 9, it's 50, and then 9 to 12 months, 75 up to 100. So it takes an awful long time for new tenants to get back up to that level, which obviously takes into account the investment that they've made in the business that they're setting up, of course.
And if I may come in there, Chair, whilst Paul's right in the fact that you mean we do not achieve full rental potential until they've occupied the space for 12 months. Out of the 30 that we've incubated over the last 5 years, we've only lost 3 of those 30. So the incubation scheme does work, and it does get them into business and gets them used to the payment of rent, if I'm honest.
Yeah, well, that was exactly the question I was going to ask. How many people, once they have to start paying full rent, just disappear? But you're saying that doesn't happen, which is really good to hear. And
to be honest with you, coincidentally, the lost trades that we have had also sold the same product. So we know that product doesn't work, really.
Right. So out of the incubator ones, you mean?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I suppose a question follows on from that. It's not really for the revenue monitor, but when somebody comes along and says, I want to have a stall and I want to sell this, and you know that the 3 previous attempts at it failed, is there any guidance given to them, or do you tell them this, or how does it work? Are they just left in the hope that perhaps they might be able to do it better, or what?
No, we do try to endeavour to support the traders, so we don't hide things. I have to say that. We are quite open and honest in regards to how we let the premises, because after all, it makes a comeback to the council. And so we try to build those business with support. And more recently, we've now linked into the Enterprise Hub, and optimistically, we will give them even more support when we incubate newer businesses.
Yeah. So I guess, so somebody who did come along with the same product, you wouldn't hide the difficulties there'd been, but you'd encourage them and assist them to try.
Well, what you tend to find is the comments from the trader is, I don't care what they did, it's about what I do.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, which can be right. Yeah. Okay, excellent. So I don't see any more hands up, so I think we just need to note that report, and thank you very much, Paul. Okay, so moving on to item 6, the Halifax High Street Fund and the Borough Market. So John Catanack, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just obviously there's quite a detailed update in the report. I'll just give a few highlights where things have changed recently. So this work still continues to the roof. The scaffolding going up in the dome at the moment has been completed. That's quite an extensive bit of scaffolding. So that's the most difficult bit of the work. That scaffolding is complete, so we can get on to do the roof in there and hopefully try and get it removed as quickly as possible. The next phase 1C of the roofing works, the scaffolding for the roofing works, will start to be erected out of hours coming up towards the end of February. The public toilets, the tender package has gone out to tender, so that's live on the Your Tender portal at the moment. So that's freely available if there's any interest in that. And we've included in it within that pack tender documentation for the traders' toilets as well. So we're going to save ourselves a little bit of procurement time in the future. Hopefully we'll get some good responses for that one. We've also submitted listed building consent for the traders' toilets, so that's in the pipeline. And we've got meetings. I'm trying to book in a meeting with Historic England to finalise to get some further details on some of the listed building consents we need. And the fruit and veg stall, the alternative fruit and veg stall, is nearly finished, so that will be ready for occupation probably within a couple of weeks. Is there any questions?
Can't see any questions. So just to be clear, there are no public toilets in there at the moment at all, or are there any for anybody?
There are some public toilets on Albion Street which are free to use. They're just down up from number 42 Market Street, so they're available. The traders have got all their facilities, but there are no public toilets within the shell of the market at the moment.
Yeah. Well, my partner won't be interested in the tender, but he'd certainly be interested in the arrival of toilet facilities. No. Traipsing forlornly around looking for some the other day. So, right, Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. I think it's kind of indicated in the report, but I was just going to ask about the impact of inflation, and obviously I know the work has been carried out in stages. Is it still likely that all the stages will be completed within the budget we've got, or is it just too early to tell?
It's too early to tell, but what we have done, the roofing package is the one that covers the longest period, and there is plenty of contingency built into that package to cover increases in materials, etc. But what the contractor has done is pre-bought a lot of materials, and we're storing them on site. So we've sort of mitigated those potential price rises on that particular material. The unknown is the glass. We can't actually order the glass until each individual pane has been physically measured, and we can't do that until the scaffold is in place. So the scaffolding, the glass is the tricky one at the moment, but glass prices are fairly steady and the supply is good at the moment.
So in terms of, it is very disrupted in there at the moment and hard to find your way around. And so how are the traders coping with it? Are they pretty sort of sanguine about it all, or are you finding that people are getting really fed up with it? Or
I'm in the market regularly, and I do try and speak to some of the traders who are affected directly by the scaffolding at the moment. And if there are concerns, we've tried to put extra signage in or extra lighting in to try and direct people to their stalls to make sure they're not in darkness or anything like that. So yes, there are grumbles, but we try and deal with them as quickly as we can.
Yeah. And I think that applied to the heating, which he's mentioned, and which, thanks to Councillor Thompson, he brought that to my attention. And yes, thank you for then, Catherine, for putting in measures to alleviate that. And make
the more glass we get in the building, the more double glazing units, the more insulation we get in, the warmer it will get.
Yeah. Okay, so again, I'm not seeing any more hands up, so I think we'll just note that report and move on to item 8, which is the Markets Manager annual update. John.
Thank you. Members will note that the last time I reported was last year, so this is my annual update and briefly describes the picture at national agenda. And as you can see, the occupancy is nowhere near 100% on a national time frame, really. And then there is a detailed paragraph on each of the markets and with supporting appendices in regards to occupancy and further considerations for the service for continual improvement this year. It's not been a very good year in comparison to last year, really. We have seen a slight dip at some venues, and more notably at Toberdon, where we've fallen 20% in occupancy to where we were last year, which was due to the establishment of 30 weeks of roadworks, I'm afraid. So there are mitigating factors that the service can't control that also impact upon occupancy. Other things that we can't control, and particularly in the market halls, is the loyalty of the traders. Now, whilst that's a very good thing, it leads to mass empty spaces when they all decide to retire en bloc. And that has been the significant case with the borough market over the past 4 years, where traders have retired and the churn, or what we call the churn of new traders, has not resulted in replacement of the ones leaving the building, really. And hence the reason for the deficit that Paul alluded to earlier. There are several things that we must consider this next decade, really. And that is the fact that there is an aging demographic of traders, and they need to be replaced to make sure that the markets continue long into the future. But one of the most significant things for me is that, unfortunately, most of the butchers and fresh food producers are a similar age to me, and therefore will possibly retire before I do, really. And therefore, over this next decade, we could see the loss of the independent butcher from the high street scene altogether if we're not careful. So there is some work that needs to go into that, and not just locally, but nationally. Because, as you can imagine, Chair, I've not seen any butchers come into the industry in the last 20 years, really. I think there's only Nick Fielding at Toberdon, who was basically working for Jim Mellin, really. There's been no new recruits, really, ever since that time. So you do have a pressure on your market halls with that, because is that the attraction to the public, etc. Although some of it is getting replaced now with food. Majority food to go, which is proving quite popular. So again, it's about how we evolve and we change with the times. There's going to be some challenges I can't hide the fact that there will be some challenges to the service coming forward in this next year, because this is an exciting opportunity for the service. I can't big this one up enough, to be honest. I've never seen this lack of investment that the grants are providing us currently, and this will give the market service a good base to try and relaunch itself and increase those occupancies to near that 100%. Because we have seen some success with the relocation. Ebden Bridge, as you can see from the appendices, performs relatively well. And most days are near that 100% occupancy. We only get a dip through the winter period, really. And so it's using that as a blueprint to how we move on the rest of them, really. But even with Ebden Bridge, there is room for improvement and room for expansion. And we showed that at Christmas when we delivered the Christmas markets down a different street in the town, encouraged by the traders in that street, who have all subsequently sent compliments into the service. So we know that markets can play a significant role in town centres. It's how we deliver them going forward, and the infrastructure improvements will help us tremendously along the way.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Is there any comments from anyone? There's a few things I want to say, but Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I was just sorry if it's a bit loud in the background still. I was just going to, obviously, John, me and you spoke a bit anyway about the markets, but it might be worth looking at it or commenting on it here, because I think the biggest thing, and we've spoke about it, John, but the biggest thing I'm conscious of is that transition in how people want to work. And I think a big thing I noticed with Hebden Bridge and other businesses that are doing that is they're also doing, you know, a lot of people are going into pop-ups, a lot of people are just doing 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week. And I was just wondering in your view, while we're doing the investment, how we can start to look at that transition and look at how we manage that in terms of encouraging people to come in. Because I don't know that many people who I think.
I don't know about anybody else, but Councillor Thompson has frozen for me. No, it's frozen. I suspect what he was going to say is he doesn't know many people are thinking.
I want to do come on up and instead to encourage trader actually functions.
I'm sorry, we lost it. When you got to I don't know many people, you then froze.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I was just saying that I'm not too sure the amount of people I know that would be willing to do that 6-day schedule in a market. So I'm wondering how we look at actually a transition and whether the indoor markets, because Hebden Bridge is already very successful with people doing shorter terms, whether we can look at the indoor markets, how we do that. I know as part of the project, they're looking at shared stalls and all kinds of things, but I think that's the direction of travel. I think people are going to want to work less, pop up and try and do more in a shorter space of time.
Yeah, I think that is probably right.
Can I just come in there, yeah. Chair? I think Councillor Thompson's hit some very pertinent points there, really. And we know this because we you know, when we talk to traders, for instance, I've got one at Hebden Bridge that is a former trainee of Gordon Ramsay. And worked his whole life in hotels and kitchens. He trades from Hebden Bridge because it gives him that ability to trade 3 days a week and have a work-life balance with the rest of the week and not those committed shifts that he once had. So if that is the picture, and we've heard that off a few people, then just trying to sustain 6-day occupancy on exclusive occupation in the borough market will be a challenge to the service. And it may mean that we have to look at or the way that we deal with the borough market going forward as to whether we create a similar environment to what they first did in the other borough market in London, whereby you create space for local producers that may come and display their products for a period of time, etc., and you churn them over on a regular basis until they want to become regular.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So that's one for the future. I don't know, in some ways, a lot of what we're discussing now is maybe what could also have been discussed under Alan's item. But when we get somebody who's retiring and they've had a stall selling electrical items or whatever for 20 years, do any of them try to sell that as a going concern? Does it vary? And are they just finding that nobody will take those particular things up, or are they not, for the most part, not trying? So the difference
between your two market halls are the fact that obviously they offer exclusive occupation. Within that exclusive occupation agreement, there is the right of assignment. So most businesses try to sell themselves before they make that decision to retire, and they only make that decision as a retirement decision. As a last resort, really, because ultimately they're all trying to chase successes to their business, really.
Okay, so they do, and it's that younger people are not interested in those particular kinds of stalls for the most part.
I think, particularly with the example you gave, there's quite a bit of specialist knowledge there, and the gentleman in question had learnt that over a 60-year period. You can't just buy that sort of product knowledge overnight, and so compound that with, I don't know what they're asking, to be honest with you. We don't search for what they're asking, but I would presume it's quite a substantial sum. Do people have that substantial sum sat in the bank willing to set up a business that they might not make loads of money off in the first year? I don't know. Something that we have to explore. Yeah.
Okay, because in Todmorden, it's got Nick Fielding as a butcher, but it's also got a recent the main vegetable stall outside has somebody who's taken it over in the last.
Well, he's a son-in-law of the existing greengrocer. The existing greengrocer's fallen a bit ill, if I'm to be straight, and so therefore Jordan's taken that one over. But again, when you allude back to Natasha's comments, he comes with social media and he's pushing his business through that. He's pushing delivery. So more recent discussions we've had, and I mean more recent in sort of recent weeks, is that people have run businesses in the background from that digital environment, but are now looking for a front end to it, shall we say. So there are opportunities, I think, along the way. It's how we get out there and we do those recruitment drives.
Yeah. Okay, so the other comment I was just going to make in relation to Todmorden, one of the points you're referring to is the uncertainty around the town deal, which I think is very difficult at the moment. And it was just to say that we are going to be discussing this at the next town board, which is later this month, and we'll have the information that is in these papers to help us discuss that and see how we can try and maybe do better in terms of reassuring traders and what role we have as a board to.
And if you wish me to attend, Chair, I'll attend.
Yeah, okay, I'll pass that on, because obviously I'm not the chair of that board anymore. So I'll pass that on to Pam Warhurst, who is. Okay, so does anybody else have any other comments, questions, queries, ideas? No, I'm not seeing anything. So in that case, we thank you for that report and we note it, and then we'll move on to the final item, number 9. Well, final substantive item, Calderdale Markets, their future and the journey, which is Alan.
Okay, thanks, Chair. And hopefully kind of leading naturally on from John's report, talking about kind of where we are now and some of the current challenges. As members will recall, at the last meeting, I offered to present a summary of the significant changes that are taking place across our markets. And I don't think there's a single market of ours that's not impacted upon significant change at the moment. So what I've set out in the slides, the series of slides, is the overall aims and the latest position, while highlighting the current issues that are being considered, both to ensure that we maximise the opportunities that come from what is major and wide-ranging investment, but also how we manage that change effectively. We've talked about the current challenges. We've talked earlier about the extensive scaffolding that's in the borough market, the impact that's having on current traders, and the reliance on traders not only for current provision but future provision as well. So there's some balancing that we need to do through these opportunities. I won't dwell too much on the current context. We all know how important our markets are to the borough as a whole and to each of our towns. And we all know the role that they play in supporting our identity and our vision for our place. The first half of the presentation sets out the current provision and the existing challenges, which you're all familiar with. We've rehearsed them many times in this group, and they've just been referenced again in the Market Manager's report. The second half of the presentation summarises the level of investment that's going into our markets, over £12 million, which is a key strand of significant investment into our towns and which builds on recent significant investment into our markets. These are exciting times for Calderdale's markets. I know we do spend an awful lot of time talking about the challenges and the difficulties and so on, but actually this is a really, really exciting time for our markets. I don't propose to go into the detail of each of the individual schemes. The headlines are set out in the slides. Jess is here to support this conversation if there's any particular specifics that anyone wants to pick up. And unless you want to raise anything at this stage, what I want to do really is to move straight through to what I consider to be the headline issues, and they're set out in the final 4 slides of the slide deck. So I'll just pause there for a moment, Chair, in case there's anything that anyone wants to raise from the kind of the previous content of the slides.
Not seeing anything, Alan, so carry on.
Nope, I'll carry on. Brilliant, thank you. I'll say it again, because it is important that we do recognise this. While we do face some challenges, this is a great news story. It provides us with an unprecedented opportunity to not only address legacy issues, and some of the detail in some of the schemes is dealing with issues that have been around for quite some time, but it also gives us an opportunity to reposition our markets ready for the future. We've talked about the changes to the economy, the changes to the retail environment, the changes to people's working practices, people's expectations. The investment that's going in gives us an opportunity to reconsider and rethink the way that our markets operate and the way that they deliver. We clearly want to secure the future of our markets and to review and extend our offer where appropriate, particularly considering the evening economy and potential additional days at some markets, and they're referenced in some of the detailed slides. That in itself gives rise to 2 immediate issues. The first, and we do keep coming back to this, we need to ensure that we have sufficient traders, which is critical, and which is an existing challenge and a recurring theme. If we look to extend market provision, then clearly we need traders who will operate more, or more traders to operate. So therein lies a bit of a challenge for us. The second part to that conundrum is, if we look to extend our offer, then we also need to bear in mind we have a relatively small market service that supports our provision. So we need to keep that under review in response to any changes and any developments. So two issues those for us to consider around the provision and the range of provision moving forward. That's the first issue for me to raise. Secondly, you'll have seen and be aware that there's a move towards the creation and development of event spaces across our markets and in other areas as well. How these spaces are used and managed is going to need some careful thought. This goes beyond the role, scope and skill set of our market service, and there are different operating models that can be used. So again, that's something we perhaps need to give some thought to as we evolve these new opportunities. We need to really consider how they will be used and how they'll be maximised to best effect. And probably the final point that I'd raise from the slides, Chair, is while the investment is clearly very much welcomed, it is already, as I've already said, and will of course to continue to create a period of disturbance and disruption. What we can't afford to do at this time is to lose the valuable traders that we've got. So one of the things that we do need to consider is how we support them through this transition and what that might look like, so that their trade and their business continues to function, continues to operate, continues to succeed, and continues to thrive as we work through this change period. And the other thing that we need to do as part of the changes is kind of manage through the impact. In some cases, it will be about relocating markets to allow the change to take place. And I think all of that's now factored into our project delivery schemes. So again, there's a bit of disturbance there that we need to manage through. We need to consider that, we need to anticipate that. We need to support and work with our traders through that period of change, because it is quite significant change, as I've already said. Those are my thoughts, Chair, and I'm more than happy to listen to any thoughts, considerations from others, and really to use this as a bit of a prompt for a conversation, if that's okay, Chair.
Okay, I'm not seeing any comments. So I don't know whether you can, either you or Jess can just tell us a bit more about what the steps that are being taken to help traders during the disruption, because I've seen this happen before at markets where huge amount of infrastructure work goes on, everybody's shifted out, and then nothing ever comes back again. So if you could just tell us a bit more about what you're doing to prevent that happening here. Yes. Yeah.
I can take that one, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, for those of you that haven't met yet, I'm Jess Thompson. I'm the corporate lead for major projects at Calderdale Council. I've been with the council since October, so I think I was 2 weeks in post at the last meeting, so still kind of firmly in catch-up mode. But yeah, so in terms of the markets, the Todmorden scheme is very much looking at the open market only. We're very much in the strategic briefing stage, so really kind of still setting out what the aims and objectives of that project are going to be. There clearly will be some consultation with market traders as part of that process. At the moment, we're looking at relocation of some stalls to Bram Square. Obviously, if that is taken forward, it'd be on a phased approach. So we would create new stalls and then offer that for decant for traders across before removing the existing stalls. So that would be part of the strategy at Todmorden. At Brighouse, the team are working with John to look at a temporary market. That'll be a combination of kind of containers for the butcher and the cafe and the other kind of fixed units, with a kind of pop-up market to support the kind of smaller stalls in the centre at Brighouse. In terms of Elland, I will admit I'm not as familiar with the strategy for Elland. John, I don't know if there is a strategy for Elland Market and how we're dealing with that during the construction phase.
If I may just come in there, Chair. Out of particularly the Elland Market, the intention there is that we would relocate that to the car park next to the Rex. That would include us having to have a shipping container to store the stalls on, because the stalls would be technically stored within the building site of what is going to be improved on the marketplace site. So that will put more demands on the team, obviously, because we've now got to build a temporary market, as is the case with Brighouse. And as Jess has rightly said there, we are looking, for want of a better word, looking after our traders in the secure units, which is the core of the market, really, which is your fishmonger, your butcher, your cafe, your street food. And so they will be supported. Now, we're only moving Brighouse 10 yard, really, because we're moving off the site to the park, to potentially the parklets and a small section of Bethel Street car park. The demands there are not too onerous, really, for a relocation, because Wednesday's occupancy is not as high as Saturday, and likewise Sundays is not as high as Saturday. But there are demands upon the team, because as members know, we took on Brighouse Market from the private sector with no additional resources. So we may have to build some form of casual resource into the provision of supplying the temporary market. The traders have all been communicated with and are kept in the loop. The only one where we not potentially keeping them in the loop is Todmorden at the moment, because there is no definite plans as of yet. It's still at concept stage, really. And that will be the most significant challenge to the council, really, will Todmorden, because, as Jess alluded to there, phased approach will be the best way forward, really, because there's nowhere to put them. If we're going to be developing Bram Square and the open market space at the same time, there is nowhere else really of a significant position, because they do occupy a very envious roadside position at Todmorden. And so, I mean, we will work through those as the scheme evolves, really. And I think in the past we've done things like this in the past with the market service. You always find that you will tend to lose. You mean, I'll look to the relocations of Ebden Bridge, the likes of Sorbie Bridge initially, because for 10 years Sorbie Bridge was 100% occupied. But it weren't when we transferred it to the site. It was when we transferred a market that was only 20% occupied, really. And so the new developments, hopefully, will generate more interest. And that has been the case at Ebden Bridge. You mean, the one day where we thought we would have problems at Ebden Bridge is probably now our most consistent, which is the Arts and Craft Day on a Saturday. And so we're hoping it'll bring new life, it'll bring new traders, it'll encourage new growth. And it's just about how we do look to support the existing traders as we go along. Inevitably, with the borough market, you're going to have obstructions, because to get to a 60-foot high roof, you need scaffolding. And so the traders have already witnessed that, and they appreciate that in a year's time, they will be trading from a better environment. But it doesn't go without the odd complaint here and there and everywhere. And we go about, to be honest, we try and focus on supporting the traders, because they are our lifeblood, really, aren't they?
Yeah. Thank you, Alan.
Thanks, Chair. Just one of John's comments there just prompted a question, and I probably should know the answer to this, John. I know we've had conversations, particularly around the borough market, but as you said there, John, the investment that's going in, the changes that are taking place, you know, the Brighouse designs, it's just such a significant improvement on what exists now. Have we started to kind of advertise and market the opportunities that will be available and when they'll be available, almost kind of starting a waiting list for traders to be able to kind of put the names down on, ready for when we open the markets? Because what we don't want to do is to get to a point where we open the markets that are severely under-occupied and then start to market the opportunities. We need to get ahead of that curve and be using the images that we've got and some of the designs that we've got to start to attract the interest and generate the interest in advance. And there'll be a timing issue though. It needs to not be too far in advance that it's not in reach, but it needs to be not too late that we start on the wrong foot, John.
If I may come in again there, Chair. So we are currently amassing waiting lists, and we've been in discussion with a couple of traders already in regards to the future site of Brighouse and potentially their requirements. Sean's at this moment in time bottoming that one out. Likewise, Ellen, we've had a few questions about what we can support at Ellen's, bearing in mind that at this moment in time we're at capacity. So hopefully the new design at Ellen will give us expansion so that we can add more traders. We've got waiting lists, as you well know, we've got waiting lists at Ebden Bridge, Ellen, and we will tend to try and use those waiting lists as well to pack out our other markets at the same time. So yeah, answer to your question is we're on with it.
Okay, thank you very much. So I just want to go back to the capacity of the council and the skills on the council. So presumably this at some stage is going to mean a business case to have investment to increase the size of the markets team, Alan? Is that what's going to be needed? I mean, that's apart from I understand that the event space that needs to be looked at and how that's going to be dealt with, and it may not be the council itself that does that, but just in terms of the markets team.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. There's probably two parts to my answer to that, Chair, which potentially and hopefully neither of which are what you suggest, because of course we know what the council's budget position is. What I would say is if we're looking at expansion of the markets into additional trading days, then, and I think you've heard me use this phrase many times, we need to look at the total cost of ownership. So if we're thinking about additional income opportunities by extending the days or the hours of our markets, then clearly we need to factor in the costs of delivering that and to net that off any potential income and to make sure that stacks up. We've talked previously about a different approach to the way that we manage markets at Sowerby Bridge. We've talked about events and themes and so on. And it's a similar kind of a case, is that in looking at doing that, we can look at what income might potentially be generated, but we need to net off the costs of delivering those things so that we're realistic about what income can be achieved. What we can't afford to do is to make optimistic assessments of income opportunities without considering the costs of delivering that. So that would be the first part of the answer to the question. The second part, in terms of future requirements, and we've been working at this for quite some time, but it's thinking about the breadth of support that the council can provide. So we do have quite a small markets team, but we have colleagues in place development teams and business and skills teams and communications teams, and it's thinking about the entirety of the council's resource and how we might more cleverly use the breadth of resource that we've got to support the requirements and needs going forward. So again, that's not something new, that's something we've been working at, but there'll be a real need for us to rely on the full extent of the council's capacity and resources to be able to support the ongoing developments.
Okay, thanks. And so when we get the revenue monitor, it makes it clear that its limitations and the fact that it doesn't factor in the costs that you're talking about. That's right, isn't it? It's effectively, it doesn't. So when we are looking at it, is it something that we ought to be having the information on how those things affect the figures in the revenue monitor?
So I guess, Chair, it does bring us back to the earlier conversation. We talked about the challenges, and John will remember, because a number of years ago I spoke to this working party about the period of change that we were going through. And at that time, I think, John, this was in anticipation of the changes around the Albany Arcade to establish that. And I did talk at that point about going through a period of change. We're all familiar with the kind of the J curve through a period of change where things will potentially, they'll dip first before they start to improve and you come out of the other side. And it's interesting when you look at the revenue monitor, while we have focused on the shortfall on the income target, and we've talked about there's a whole number of changes going to take place over the next few years. So now it would be impossible to assess what the revenue income might be in 2 or 3 years' time, because we don't know, how many traders we'll have, what days we'll be operating, the costs, etc., etc., etc. So now would be the wrong time to review that position. When you actually look at the net outturn for the last 4 years, during what has been an incredibly difficult period, the bottom line has improved year on year. So I think we need to not overlook that. We've made every effort to look at every possible opportunity to minimise costs and to maximise income and to try and close that gap between the income targets and the actual income generated. So while we're talking about £143,000 shortfall at the end of this year, 3 years ago we were talking about 260,000, and year on year that's reduced and reduced and reduced. We will get to a point, as was discussed earlier, I think in this day and age, and probably with the increased mobility around traders and so on, the thought that we have an income target based on 100% occupancy across our markets, I think is just unrealistic. What would be a realistic percentage occupancy, I think, is something that we need to get to. And I don't think we've got enough information at this point in time to be able to make that assessment. So I think at a future point, when things are a little bit clearer about the size of the markets that will operate, the level of interest in those markets, these waiting lists that John's talked about, and at that point, the way that we operate, are we looking at shared stalls where there's a different model of delivery? Once some of that's a little bit clearer, then we can make more realistic assessments about what we can expect in terms of income from our markets. But in terms of the costs and the income position, as I say, over the last 4 years, we've made year-on-year improvements, but we'll get to a point where we can squeeze that no further, and then we need to reset our baseline, I would suggest.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, maybe I didn't make myself clear, but in the beginning of the finance report, it says that this is about the revenue budget, and the premises, utility, repair and rates budgets are the responsibility of corporate assets. And this report doesn't include details of those costs and projections. So what I was saying was, and I hope you weren't answering this, because if you did, I didn't understand you. Do we need to know what those are if we're looking at the whole cost? And are we, in effect, sort of looking at a partial picture?
Well, I was just going to say, Paul might disagree with me, or he might say something slightly different. If we're looking at the true cost of the service, then yes, we need to consider the premises costs. We need to consider, for example, the costs that when we've talked about, the radio adverts that the communications team have kind of delivered on our behalf, you'd look at the entire costs of delivery of the service if you were looking at the true cost of ownership. Sorry, Paul, I don't know whether you're going to say something slightly different.
No, I'll just add to that, really, Chair, is that, I think we've considered this in the past. If you want the whole picture, we'd bring the buildings in, and you'd certainly want that position if you're looking at future investment. So we can bring that information if you like. It's just that in the current climate, it would be distorted by the significant increase we've had in energy costs and costs around that, so do you want that picture with it all in?
Yeah. And presumably the reason it's like that is because CAFM is a separate body, yes. And it's consistent with how we would look at it across the council. So
yeah, you know, we have the, sorry, Chair, we have the CAFM board, and you know, we'll be reporting two things in different reports. We're reporting the CAFM bit in the markets and the markets in the CAF. You know, I think the CAFM board is the right place to receive the report around the building cost. Personally, if the council was wanting to consider a £2 or £3 million investment of its own money, then you might want to look at the overall picture for the market at the point of considering that investment. But I think at the minute, you know, depending what you want, Chair, we could continue as we are.
Okay, Alan.
Yeah, just to say, Chair, I guess the analysis depends on the question that we're seeking to answer.
Yeah.
If the question is, what does the service truly cost in the round, then you'd want to capture and factor in all of the costs that are associated with the delivery of that service. If the question is, how effective is the service at managing its own costs, then you'd exclude the things for which it doesn't have direct responsibility and accountability for, and you'd look at the kind of the service budget itself. But it really depends what the question is that we're seeking to answer, I think.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. John? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. CAFM have a set budget for all expenditure for premise-related activity, so it wouldn't have changed what we're reporting to members today, because obviously it would net off. One would net off against the other, really. But it is right. Every year end, we look at a profit and loss account for each market, where the budgets are brought in from CAFM, the spend is brought in from CAFM, and then we view the profit and loss trading account for each market. So we do consider it. Whether members want to see that is down to the group.
Okay, right. Well, probably not at the moment, I suspect. I don't see anybody else leaping in to start asking questions about this, so I think no. I think we'll leave it as it is for the moment. I think there are good reasons for it. Okay, so does anybody else have any comments on that report? Anything they'd like to feed in? I'm not seeing anything. So thank you. So, Alan, from the point of view of this board, then, what do you really need from us in terms of carrying forward the things that you refer to at the end of the report that are for the future?
Well,
what would you
Councillor Thompson wants to come in, Chair.
Sorry?
I think Councillor Tom. Oh, did Councillor Thompson show then? Sorry, I thought Councillor Thompson's hand went up.
Doesn't look like it, okay. But he may have frozen again.
Right. I do think, Chair, probably the most well, there are two things. I think the most significant one, John's already referred to. Where's the next generation of high street butchers coming from? I don't think this group can necessarily answer that question. I think that's a much bigger question than the scope of this group. It is a concern. You know, what are the expectations of future markets? Where are the traders coming from? Where are the kind of the specialist traders coming from? How's that generation going to be creating? I just think that's just a big question. I don't know the answer to that, John. I don't know whether that's a conversation that takes place within the industry, and even that goes beyond markets themselves. The second point, Jess has described the support that we're putting in place to manage the transition for the traders. I think there's still a question about whether there's more that we need to do to be able to support them through the change process that we're undergoing at the moment. So what I wouldn't want us to do is to spend the best part of £5 million on improving the borough market and find that at the end of the completion of the works in March or middle of 2024, we're a third occupied because the traders have not been able to sustain their operation during that period. Now, I'm not expecting that'll be the case, but what I would say is I think we do need to think very carefully about, you know, how we make sure that we facilitate and support the ongoing trade for those traders who are going to be severely impacted. Change does cause disruption and disturbance, and we know that and we recognise that. And we need to, as John C. said earlier, we need to keep in touch with the traders. We need to understand any concerns they've got. We need to make adjustments within the programme, like additional lighting or signage, etc. Those are things that we can quite easily and conceivably do. But it's whether there's a need for support beyond that in conversation with the traders to ensure that they can continue to survive during this period and thrive post the investment.
Okay, thanks. So that really takes us to the end of the papers and moves us on to the future work programme. So I just wonder whether at the moment we have this every time we have an update on the Future High Streets Fund and the Halifax Borough Market, but whether in April we really ought to be having an update on all of the markets and the programmes there, not just the Borough Market. Because if we have a role at all, it's in seeing how that's going and offering suggestions or saying, well, that ain't good enough, what are we going to do about it? So I wonder whether that can be added to the 11th of April meeting.
Yeah, we can do that, Chair.
John?
We will by the next meeting, hopefully, I'm sure Jess will confirm otherwise, be a bit better positioned with programmes in regards to the likes of the Future High Street Fund at Elland, the town deal at Todmorden. We will have possibly progressed to planning stage at Brighouse by then. And so we will have a bit more information in regards to those markets. And it is particularly, you know, I can't make comments in my report, Chair, in regards to Todmorden and the roadworks, etc. And I mean, uncertainty around the deal if we don't report back to you, in my view.
Yeah. Okay. So other than that, is there anything else that anybody wants to see on the April agenda or even indeed later meetings? Councillor Thompson and then Paul.
I think Paul was due to come in before me, so that's probably easier to do that way around.
Sorry, Chair. I was just going to say if we move the next monitor to the meeting after, because we're halfway through the close down period, it would make sense to report the first monitor and the outturn at the first markets working group. Yeah. So I delay it until after the April meeting.
Okay. Yeah, and so Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, just to apologise again. Keep having to move around to try and get into that and try and find somewhere quiet. I just wonder, it might be quite interesting. I'm not sure if it might be quite interesting, and this is more perhaps a little bit in terms of personal interest, but it might be interesting if maybe not for the future meeting, the one in April, but it might be worth looking at facilitating future meetings after that point in person, and whether we actually try and do them in a market space or a space like that, just because I you know, we've had Zoom for a long time and we've all got used to it, but I often find you can get more done and it can be more productive in person. Obviously there's accessibility issues and all of that, but it's something I'd be keen to look at. And just it'd also be good, or it might be something that the working group could look at, is particularly the works around the borough market, but also looking at in future perhaps having a site visit, something like that they, I know they do it on licensing, they do site visits and things like that, but it might be something we could do around the works as well, just to get that visual representation of where it's at.
Yeah, okay. I don't think that's a problem. So Sophie, is it your responsibility or Alan's or both of you or mine to make sure these things get taken up? But I can discuss it outside the meeting, I think, perhaps with Alan and Sophie. And I don't think in-person meetings are a problem. I think it's just for various reasons I've asked them to be virtual so far.
Yeah, in-person meetings are absolutely fine. I'm not sure if I misunderstood because my connection's not great, but we couldn't hold meetings in a market location. They would need to be in the town hall because it's an open meeting that public can attend, and our venue needs to be consistent. But site visits prior to or following a meeting are absolutely fine.
Yeah, okay, that's lovely. So yes, I think I'll take that forward after the meeting then.
And should you wish site visits, Chair, I can facilitate that.
Yeah.
At any time, really. It doesn't have to be on the day of the meeting.
On the day of the meeting, no, indeed, no. Right, okay. So unless there's any other business anybody wants to raise, I'm not seeing anything. That's it. Thank you all very much for coming, and officers for preparing the reports and answering questions.